The alien woman was injured. The human soldier learned who she was while carrying her on his back. The sky above the planet Karathos burned with streaks of red and orange, a chaotic display of fire and smoke from the ongoing war. Human forces had been allied with a coalition of friendly alien races for months, fighting against a ruthless enemy that sought to dominate the sector. Sergeant Daniel Hayes had been on the front lines for over 4 years, and he had seen things that could haunt a normal person for a lifetime. Yet, he still stood strong, guided by a sense of duty and an unshakable determination to protect those who could not protect themselves. That morning, Daniel's unit received orders to carry out a reconnaissance mission. The goal was simple on paper: gather information on enemy troop movements, locate their supply lines, and report back to the main fleet. In practice, the mission was far from simple. Karathos was an unpredictable world, filled with jagged mountains, deep ravines, and ruins from centuries-old wars. The enemy knew every corner of this planet, making every step dangerous. Daniel led his small squad of 5 through the rocky terrain, their boots crunching against loose gravel and broken stone. The air smelled of ash and metal, heavy with the scent of burning machinery. His squad members were skilled, but he could feel the tension building with every step. Daniel had learned to trust his instincts, and today his instincts told him something was wrong. They reached a narrow pass, and suddenly the ground shook with the force of an explosion. Dust and debris filled the air as Daniel threw himself to the side, narrowly avoiding being hit by falling rocks. Shouts echoed in the chaos, and the squad was scattered in seconds. The world had become a blur of fire, smoke, and shouting. Daniel's heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay calm. Panic would get no one out alive. He moved quickly, scanning the area for survivors. The enemy forces were nearby, and their presence was unmistakable. The low hum of energy weapons, the harsh clatter of alien armor, and the faint glow of red sensors moving between the rocks. Daniel crouched behind a large boulder, taking a moment to breathe and assess the situation. One by one, he spotted the other members of his squad, either injured or hiding, but one figure caught his attention far beyond the chaos. There, a short distance away, lay an alien woman, clearly wounded and unconscious. Her armor was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It was sleek, light, and intricately detailed, with markings that glowed faintly in the dim light. There was a sense of authority in her presence, even in unconsciousness, as if she carried the weight of her people's hopes on her shoulders. Without thinking twice, Daniel knew he could not leave her behind. He ran toward her, dodging enemy patrols and leaping over jagged stones. When he reached her, he knelt down to check her pulse. It was faint but steady, a sign of life that filled him with relief. "You're going to be okay," he muttered, though he was far from certain of his own words. There was no time for hesitation. He needed to get her to safety before the enemy noticed them. With a deep breath, Daniel hoisted the alien woman onto his back. She was surprisingly light for her height, though her armor made the task more difficult. As he began to move, he could feel every subtle movement of her body, every faint shiver caused by pain. It was a delicate balance. One wrong step could injure her further or alert the enemy. Daniel gritted his teeth, focusing on each careful step. The terrain was unforgiving. Sharp rocks cut through his gloves, loose gravel threatened to make him slip, and the smoke from distant fires stung his eyes. Yet Daniel pressed forward. Every step was measured, calculated as he navigated through the battlefield. He kept glancing over his shoulder, watching for the enemy, ready to take cover or engage if necessary. But for now, stealth was their best ally. As they moved, Daniel noticed more details about the alien woman. Her hair shimmered faintly in the dim light, almost like a soft silver flame. Her skin had a delicate hue, and faint bioluminescent veins ran along her neck and arms. Even injured and unconscious, there was an aura of nobility around her that commanded respect. Daniel did not understand the alien language or culture fully, but he felt instinctively that she was someone important, someone whose survival could change the fate of the planet. Hours passed as Daniel navigated the rocky ridges and narrow paths. He paused only briefly, taking cover in the shadow of a large cliff. He adjusted the alien woman on his back, checking her pulse again. It was steady, though weak. He whispered words of encouragement, though she could not hear him. The act itself, he realized, gave him a sense of purpose. He had been trained to fight and kill when necessary, but this rescue was different. This was about saving life, about making a difference in a way that no weapon could. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply. Daniel wrapped his coat around the alien woman, protecting her from the cold as best he could. The stars above were faintly visible through the smoky sky, a reminder that despite the chaos below, the universe continued in silent, infinite beauty. He thought about his own home back on Earth, a distant world filled with green forests and blue oceans. How strange it was to think of it now, so far away, in a galaxy filled with wars he could barely understand. The sounds of the battlefield changed as darkness settled in. Explosions became distant echoes, and the alien patrols relied more on sensors than sight. Daniel took advantage of the cover, moving silently, carefully avoiding detection. Every step was exhausting, but he refused to give up. The woman on his back had trusted him with her life, even unknowingly, and he would not fail her. During a brief pause, Daniel noticed something hanging around her neck, a medallion with strange symbols that glowed faintly. He had seen similar markings in intelligence briefings, symbols associated with leadership and royalty among the allied alien races. Daniel's eyes widened. He was carrying someone of great importance. His responsibility had just grown far heavier than he had imagined. The realization did not intimidate him, it strengthened his resolve. He had faced danger countless times, but this mission was different. The weight on his back was more than physical. It was a responsibility that could shape the outcome of the conflict on Karathos. He whispered again to her, promising to keep her safe, even though he did not know if she could hear him. As he continued, Daniel encountered his first major obstacle, a narrow gorge filled with unstable rocks. One wrong step could send both of them tumbling into the abyss below. He carefully tested each foothold, moving slowly, making sure the alien woman remained balanced. His training had taught him patience and precision, and now every lesson mattered. One misstep could be fatal. Halfway across the gorge, a low hum alerted him to approaching enemy scouts. Daniel froze, instinctively lowering his profile. He listened as they passed, their footsteps crunching on the rocks. The alien woman remained still on his back, her faint pulse steady under his careful watch. Once the scouts moved past, Daniel exhaled slowly, relieved that they had been undetected. Stealth had saved them for now, but he knew it could not last forever. The hours dragged on, each step a test of endurance. Daniel's muscles burned, and fatigue threatened to take over, but he pushed forward. Every step was for the woman on his back, for her people, and for the hope that their survival could bring peace to the galaxy. His mind wandered to the countless stories he had heard of human courage and heroism. He realized that he was living one of those stories now, not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. Finally, as dawn approached, Daniel spotted a structure in the distance, an abandoned human outpost partially hidden among the rocks. It was not much, but it offered shelter and a moment to rest. Carefully, he navigated the final stretch, placing the alien woman safely inside. He lowered her onto the floor, gently removing her helmet to check for injuries. Her breathing was shallow but steady, a sign that she had survived the night. Daniel sat beside her, exhausted but relieved. The night had tested every skill, every ounce of courage he possessed, yet he had made it through. He looked at her face, faintly illuminated by the morning light, and wondered what her people would think if they knew a human had risked everything to save her. Perhaps they would be grateful, perhaps wary, but Daniel knew he had done what was right. He allowed himself a brief moment of rest, his mind replaying the events of the night. The explosions, the narrow escapes, the weight on his back, it all seemed unreal. Yet the alien woman remained alive, and that was enough for now. Daniel understood that their journey was far from over. The war raged on, and her survival was just the beginning of a larger story, one in which he would play a critical role. As the sun rose, casting light over the scarred landscape of Karathos, Daniel helped the alien woman sit up. She stirred slightly, opening her eyes to reveal a faint glow, a sign of her alien physiology. For the first time, she looked directly at him, and though she could not speak yet, there was a recognition in her gaze. Daniel nodded silently, understanding that their journey together was only beginning. With careful planning, he prepared to move out again, knowing the path ahead would be just as dangerous, if not more. But Daniel was ready. He had carried a princess across a battlefield, fought through enemy territory, and survived the night. Whatever came next, he would face it with the same courage, ingenuity, and determination that had carried him this far. The mission was no longer just about survival. It was about protecting someone who could change the course of a war, someone whose life was intertwined with the fate of countless beings. Daniel knew that from this moment on, every decision, every action, and every step would matter, not just for him, but for the galaxy itself. The early morning light cut through the smoke and haze of Carathos, revealing the full extent of the battlefield. Jagged mountains rose like broken teeth against the sky, and the distant ruins of once thriving cities stood as silent witnesses to decades of war. Sergeant Daniel Hayes tightened the straps of his pack and glanced at the alien woman resting in the corner of the abandoned outpost. She remained unconscious, her chest rising and falling slowly, her breathing shallow but steady. Daniel had kept watch through the night, listening to the distant sounds of the battlefield, the clashing of alien weapons, and the occasional tremor of explosions. Each noise reminded him that danger was never far away. He knew that if they were discovered, neither of them would survive long. The human reconnaissance team had already been scattered, and Daniel was now alone in a foreign land, carrying a life that was far more valuable than his own. He moved cautiously toward the door of the outpost, peering out over the jagged rocks below. Enemy patrols were still active, and sensors glowed faintly in the distance, scanning the terrain. Daniel knew they had to leave before the patrols discovered the outpost. Time was a luxury they did not have. With careful precision, he lifted the alien woman once again, feeling the weight of her on his back. It was a different kind of weight than before, a responsibility that demanded every ounce of his strength, courage, and attention. The first step outside was always the hardest. Loose gravel crunched underfoot, and Daniel moved slowly, testing every step before committing his weight. The alien woman stirred slightly, murmuring in a language Daniel could not understand. He glanced over his shoulder to see her eyelids fluttering, faint light shimmering along the contours of her face. He whispered softly, hoping the sound of his voice might provide comfort. "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." The terrain was treacherous. Sharp rocks jutted from the ground, unstable ledges threatened to collapse beneath his feet, and the faint light of dawn revealed deep ravines that could swallow both of them in an instant. Daniel used every skill he had learned in years of combat. His eyes scanned constantly, searching for both natural hazards and enemy forces. His hands adjusted the alien woman on his back with care, making sure she remained secure and uninjured. As they moved forward, Daniel noticed more details about the alien woman's physiology. Her skin had a subtle shimmer, and faint bioluminescent veins traced intricate patterns across her arms and neck. Her hair glowed softly, like strands of silver in the dim light. Even in her injured state, there was an aura of authority and strength. Daniel understood instinctively that she was no ordinary soldier. Someone of her stature would be key to the balance of power on Carathos and perhaps across the galaxy. Hours passed as Daniel navigated narrow cliffs and winding paths. The sun climbed higher, casting harsh light over the rocky landscape. Sweat poured down his face and his muscles burned, but he refused to stop. Every moment they spent exposed was a risk, yet the thought of leaving her behind was unthinkable. He had made a promise to himself to protect her at all costs, and he intended to keep it. Suddenly, a low hum echoed from the canyon below. Daniel froze, listening intently. The hum grew louder, accompanied by a faint vibration in the ground. Enemy scouts were approaching. He ducked behind a large rock, adjusting the alien woman's position to keep her safe and stable. Her eyes flickered open slightly, though she did not fully awaken. Daniel's heart pounded. They were in a precarious position, and discovery would mean almost certain death. He peered over the rock and saw a squad of enemy patrols moving carefully through the canyon. Their armor glowed with a faint red light, and their weapons were raised, scanning for movement. Daniel's mind raced. He could not fight them all. His only chance was to use the terrain to their advantage. Slowly, he began to back away, inching along the cliffside, staying just out of the patrol's line of sight. Every step required perfect balance. One misstep and both of them would fall. By mid-morning, Daniel had navigated past the immediate threat. He found a narrow path that led down into a dense cluster of rocks, providing cover from aerial sensors and enemy patrols. He lowered the alien woman gently, letting her rest while he scouted ahead. He realized that even brief stops were dangerous. Lingering too long could attract attention. Yet he needed a moment to think, to plan their next move. Daniel glanced at the medallion hanging from her neck. The symbols glowed faintly in the sunlight, intricate shapes that seemed to pulse with her faint energy signature. Daniel had seen reports of similar markings in briefings before, the emblems of alien royalty, leaders whose survival could determine the fate of entire civilizations. He swallowed hard. The woman he was carrying was a princess, a key figure in her world's political and military landscape. The weight of responsibility pressed even heavier on his shoulders. Despite the danger, Daniel could not ignore his curiosity. Who was she? What had she been doing in the middle of a battlefield? Why had the enemy targeted her? Each question added urgency to his mission, but there were no answers in the chaos around him. He could only move forward, guided by instinct and determination. As the day progressed, the terrain became increasingly difficult. They had to climb steep slopes, cross fragile bridges of rock, and leap over deep chasms. Daniel's training in survival and combat was put to the ultimate test. His body ached, his hands were cut and bruised, but he refused to slow down. Every step he took was a step toward keeping her alive. During a brief rest, he allowed himself to examine her more closely. Her armor, though elegant, was clearly damaged from the ambush. Dents and scratches covered the surface, and faint scorch marks hinted at energy weapon strikes. Despite this, the armor still carried an air of authority. Daniel realized that she had survived more than just this battle. She had survived countless challenges, a testament to her strength and resilience. As night approached, Daniel found a small cave nestled in a rocky ridge. It was not much, but it provided shelter from the harsh wind and a moment of safety. He lowered the alien woman carefully, placing her on a makeshift bed of torn fabric and debris. Her eyes flickered open, faintly glowing in the dim light. She looked at him with a mixture of confusion and recognition. Daniel offered a reassuring nod. "Rest, you're safe here. I won't let anyone harm you." Throughout the night, Daniel kept watch, his senses alert to every sound. The enemy could strike at any moment, and he knew they had limited resources. Yet he felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time since he began carrying her, he felt that they might actually survive. The alien woman stirred occasionally, murmuring in her language. Daniel could not understand her words, but the tone was soft, almost grateful. By morning, Daniel had made a plan. They needed to move toward a human outpost several kilometers away, a location that could offer supplies, medical aid, and possibly communication with his fleet. The journey would be perilous, but it was the only chance they had. He lifted her onto his back once more, adjusting her position to reduce strain and keep her safe. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. As they moved forward, Daniel reflected on what had happened. In the chaos of battle, he had discovered something rare, the opportunity to protect life rather than destroy it. Every human story he had heard about courage, sacrifice, and heroism suddenly made sense. He was living one of those stories, carrying a life that could change the course of a war, perhaps even the fate of a planet. Hours passed, and the terrain grew even more treacherous. They encountered narrow ledges, crumbling cliffs, and sudden drops that demanded careful navigation. Daniel's muscles screamed in protest, but he pressed on, knowing that stopping was not an option. The alien woman's breathing was steady, and the faint pulse of her life force gave him hope. He whispered words of encouragement, even though she could not respond. Each word was a promise, a vow to protect her no matter the cost. Eventually, Daniel spotted a faint structure in the distance, a partially ruined building that appeared to be an abandoned human observation post. Relief washed over him. It was a temporary haven, a chance to rest, reassess, and plan the next stage of their journey. With renewed determination, he carefully navigated the final stretch, mindful of every loose stone, every unstable ledge. When they finally reached the outpost, Daniel lowered the alien woman gently, removing her helmet to check for injuries. Her breathing remained shallow but steady, a sign that she had survived another day. Daniel allowed himself a brief moment to breathe, relief and exhaustion washing over him simultaneously. They had made it, but he knew the journey was far from over. The enemy was still out there, and the princess's survival was only the beginning of a much larger story. He helped her sit up, adjusting the armor pieces that had shifted during the long journey. She opened her eyes fully this time, glowing softly in the morning light. There was a spark of recognition in her gaze, as if she understood that he had risked everything to save her. Daniel nodded silently, a mutual understanding passing between them. This journey was far from over, but for now they had survived another day, and that was enough. The human soldier and the alien woman were no longer just two individuals caught in the chaos of war. They were a team, bound by necessity, courage, and the unspoken understanding that their actions could shape the future of the galaxy. As Daniel prepared to rest briefly, he knew that the challenges ahead would test every skill he possessed, but he was ready. He had carried a princess across a battlefield, survived ambushes, and outsmarted enemy scouts. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it with the same determination, ingenuity, and bravery that had brought them this far. The small outpost was silent except for the occasional creak of old metal and the whisper of the wind outside. Sergeant Daniel Hayes sat beside the alien woman, whose body was still fragile from the ambush. Her breathing was steadier now, and her eyes opened fully, revealing a faint glow that shimmered like liquid silver. Daniel studied her closely, noticing the subtle patterns of bioluminescent veins running along her arms and neck. They pulsed faintly with her heartbeat, creating a quiet rhythm that contrasted with the chaos outside. For a long while, neither spoke. Daniel focused on patching up the remaining scratches in her armor, his hands careful and steady. He had learned over the years that every action mattered, no matter how small, and that precision could mean the difference between life and death. Even as he worked, he remained alert, listening for the slightest sound of movement outside. Enemy patrols could appear at any moment, and he had to be ready. The alien woman stirred, her eyes narrowing slightly as she observed Daniel. She tried to sit up, but pain caused her to falter. Daniel moved quickly, steadying her with a strong arm. "Easy," he said gently. "You're safe here, you don't need to move yet." His voice was calm, firm, and carried a kind of reassurance that seemed to relax her. She exhaled slowly, allowing herself to lean on him. After a few moments, she spoke in her language, the words melodic and foreign to Daniel's ears. He could not understand them, but her tone conveyed urgency mixed with exhaustion. Daniel shook his head slowly. "I don't understand you," he admitted, "but I promise I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe." He held up a small translation device he had carried in his pack, one that could interpret basic alien speech patterns. "Maybe this can help." The device beeped softly as she spoke again, the words translated into simple English. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice weak but clear. Daniel blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of the question despite the strange circumstances. "I'm Daniel Hayes," he replied carefully. "A human soldier, that's all. You survived an ambush. I carried you here to keep you safe." The alien woman's eyes widened slightly at the word carried. She looked at him with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "You carried me?" she repeated, her voice trembling. Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of his actions more acutely now. "Yes, through enemy territory. It wasn't easy, but I wouldn't leave you behind." He kept his tone steady, though inside he felt a mix of pride and exhaustion. She leaned back, closing her eyes briefly, as if trying to comprehend what he had just said. "You risked your life," she whispered. Daniel shrugged lightly, a modest gesture. "It's what any soldier should do, but you survived something that few could. That matters too." After a moment of silence, she opened her eyes again, looking at him with more focus. "I am Princess Lysara," she said, her voice steadier now. Daniel's eyes widened. A princess. The medallion around her neck, the faint aura of authority he had sensed, all made sense now. He had unknowingly carried royalty across a battlefield, through enemy territory, and kept her alive. The responsibility weighed heavily on him, but he felt a surge of determination. "Princess," he repeated, carefully testing the word. "You mean you are royalty. Your people, they need you." She nodded, her eyes flickering with a mix of pride, fear, and exhaustion. "Yes, I am the heir to my world. If I fall, if I am captured, the enemy will gain power they should not have." Her voice trembled slightly, and Daniel understood the gravity of her words. He had saved more than a life. He had protected the future of a civilization. She attempted to sit upright again, wincing as pain shot through her body. Daniel moved to support her, wrapping an arm around her and helping her remain steady. "Take it slow," he advised. "You've been through a lot. You need to recover before you move again." She nodded, her expression softening as she allowed herself to rely on him. As she rested, Daniel considered their situation. Carathos was still dangerous, with enemy forces patrolling the terrain relentlessly. The nearest human outpost was far away, and communication with his fleet was limited. Yet, he felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had experienced before. This was no ordinary mission. It was a chance to protect life, to influence the outcome of a conflict through courage and determination. Hours passed, and Princess Lysara began to regain some strength. She looked at Daniel carefully, as if trying to understand him beyond words. "You are different from others," she said softly. Daniel tilted his head, unsure what she meant. "Different? How?" She hesitated, then said, "Others, humans, they fight for survival, for power, for orders. But you act with purpose beyond that. You protect even when it is dangerous for you." Daniel felt a quiet warmth in his chest. Recognition, especially from a princess, was not something he sought, but it carried meaning. "I don't know about purpose," he said slowly. "I just do what I think is right. Sometimes that's enough." She nodded, her eyes reflecting a faint glow. "Enough, yes, enough to change the course of war." The conversation was interrupted by distant sounds of movement outside. Daniel immediately tensed, signaling her to stay low. Through a small crack in the outpost wall, he could see enemy patrols moving carefully among the rocks. Their sensors glowed faintly red, scanning the area for any sign of life. Daniel knew they could not stay here long. Time was running out and they needed to move before discovery. He helped Princess Lysara stand, supporting her carefully. "We have to go," he said softly. "I know it hurts, but staying here is too dangerous. We'll find a safer place, and I'll make sure you're all right." She nodded, trusting him despite the pain, and leaned on him as they prepared to leave. As they moved through the rocky terrain, Daniel noticed more details about Lysara. Her movements, though weakened by injury, were precise and deliberate. Her eyes scanned the environment constantly, and her senses seemed to perceive details that most humans would overlook. Even in vulnerability, she carried an air of authority and awareness that was remarkable. Daniel realized that her survival was not just about luck or human intervention. It was also about her own resilience and training. They navigated narrow ledges and unstable paths, Daniel guiding her carefully while remaining alert to any threats. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. He could hear her breathing, faint but steady, and it gave him a sense of reassurance. The bond between them, forged through shared struggle, grew stronger with each moment. By midday, they reached a narrow canyon that offered some cover from enemy sensors. Daniel paused briefly, letting Lysara rest against a rock. She took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting gratitude and determination. "Daniel, you have risked much," she said quietly. "Not just your life, but your honor, your duty. I will not forget this." Daniel shrugged lightly, though inside he felt the weight of her words. "I don't do it for honor," he said. "I do it because it's right. Sometimes right is more important than anything else." Lysara nodded, understanding the depth of his meaning. "You are human," she said softly, almost to herself. "And yet you are more than humans often are, courage, wisdom, and heart." The canyon narrowed, forcing them to move single file along a ledge that overlooked a deep ravine. Daniel adjusted his grip, making sure she remained balanced and secure. The path was treacherous, with loose rocks that could crumble underfoot at any moment. Yet they moved steadily, their trust in each other growing with every step. As afternoon approached, Daniel spotted a faint structure in the distance. It appeared to be a small alien ruin, partially hidden among the rocks. It was a risky destination, but it could provide shelter from the enemy and a chance to rest. He guided Lysara carefully toward it, navigating through narrow passes and over unstable stone bridges. Upon reaching the ruin, they found it partially intact, offering protection from the elements and a vantage point to observe the surrounding terrain. Daniel lowered Lysara gently to the ground, helping her sit against a stable wall. "We'll rest here for a moment," he said. "It's not much, but it's safe for now." Lysara looked at him, her eyes softening with gratitude. "You are more than I expected," she said. "I did not think humans or anyone would risk so much for me." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe you just haven't met the right ones," he replied. "Sometimes people surprise you even in the worst circumstances." For the next several hours, they rested in relative safety. Daniel kept watch, scanning the horizon for any signs of the enemy. Lysara remained quiet, her strength slowly returning as she reflected on the events of the past day. Despite her injuries, she felt a growing sense of hope. The human soldier who had carried her through the battlefield had shown her something remarkable: human courage, loyalty, and ingenuity. As dusk approached, Daniel helped her to her feet. They needed to continue moving if they were to reach a safer location before nightfall. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but both of them knew that together they stood a chance. Lysara, princess of her world, and Daniel, a human soldier, were now bound by trust, courage, and a shared determination to survive and protect what mattered most. The ruins offered a brief respite, but Daniel knew they could not stay long. Enemy patrols moved constantly across the rocky terrain, and even a hidden position would eventually be discovered. He adjusted Princess Lysara's armor and guided her to a safer corner, making sure she was steady and comfortable. She leaned on him lightly, still weak from the ambush, but her eyes burned with determination. She was a survivor, and Daniel respected that more than he could express. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Daniel scanned the horizon. In the distance, he noticed a faint shimmer that indicated a spacecraft landing pad, likely a neutral station used for trade and supplies. It was risky, but it was their best chance for medical aid and to communicate with his fleet. He explained the plan to Lysara, careful to keep his voice calm and reassuring. She nodded, understanding the urgency. Together they would move step by careful step across the unforgiving terrain. The journey was exhausting. The rocky paths twisted and turned unpredictably, forcing Daniel to navigate around steep cliffs and loose stones. Every movement required balance and precision, as one misstep could send them tumbling into a ravine. Lysara relied on him completely, trusting his instincts, while Daniel marveled at her resilience. Even injured, she maintained a presence that commanded respect, her posture and demeanor reflecting years of training and leadership. As they moved, Daniel reflected on the alien civilization she represented. Reports from his fleet had described her people as proud, disciplined, and technologically advanced. They valued honor and loyalty, yet their society was under constant threat from the enemy. The survival of Princess Lysara was not just important, it was critical. If she fell into enemy hands, it could shift the balance of power across the sector. Daniel's sense of responsibility deepened, fueling his resolve. By mid-afternoon, they reached a narrow canyon that offered some cover from aerial sensors. Daniel paused to allow Lysara to rest against a rock. Her breathing was steady, and she closed her eyes briefly. "You've done more than I imagined," she said softly. No one has ever carried me through danger like this," Daniel shrugged modestly. "I didn't do it for praise," he said. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." She looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting admiration and quiet awe. "Humans, you are capable of courage beyond measure," she said. "I had heard stories, but I never expected to witness it firsthand." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Recognition from a princess was unusual, but it carried weight. "We all have moments that define us," he said. "This is one of those moments for both of us." Their journey continued, each step more challenging than the last. Narrow ledges forced careful navigation, crumbling cliffs threatened to collapse beneath them, and enemy patrols moved silently in the distance. Daniel relied on his training and instincts, scanning constantly, adjusting his grip on Lysara and planning their path with meticulous care. Every decision was critical. One mistake could end their journey and her life. By late afternoon, they spotted the edge of a human trade station. It was small but functional, with docking bays and rudimentary defenses. Daniel could see activity around the station, but it appeared lightly guarded. He led Lysara carefully, using the terrain to avoid detection. As they approached, a squad of station guards noticed them. Daniel quickly raised his hands in a gesture of peace, and one of the guards approached cautiously. "Identify yourselves," the guard demanded, his weapon ready but not raised. Daniel held out the translation device, explaining their situation in simple terms. The guard listened carefully, then lowered his weapon slightly, gesturing for them to follow. "We'll get you inside," he said, "but keep your hands visible. Protocol is strict here." Daniel nodded, grateful for the cooperation. Lysara followed, leaning lightly on him for support. Inside the station, Daniel was relieved to see medical supplies and basic equipment that could treat her injuries properly. He guided her to a private area, allowing her to rest while he spoke with the station commander. The commander was skeptical at first, questioning why a human soldier had rescued a high-ranking alien official. Daniel explained calmly, detailing the ambush and their narrow escape. The commander studied him, clearly weighing the truth of his words. Finally, the commander nodded. "You've done well," he said. "We'll provide medical aid for the princess and ensure her safety while you plan your next move." Daniel allowed himself a moment of relief. For the first time since the ambush, he felt a small measure of security. They were not yet safe, but they had temporary shelter, resources, and time to regroup. While Lysara received treatment, Daniel took the opportunity to gather information. He learned that the enemy had advanced patrols across the region, and that intelligence on their movements was limited. The princess's mission had been diplomatic in nature, aimed at negotiating peace with neighboring factions. Her ambush had been carefully planned, indicating that the enemy had both motive and knowledge of her movements. The stakes were higher than Daniel had imagined. After receiving basic medical attention, Lysara was able to move with more stability. She sat beside Daniel, her expression contemplative. "You have risked your life for me," she said softly. "I do not know how to repay you." Daniel shook his head. "You don't need to repay me," he said. "I did what I thought was right. That's all anyone can ask for." She studied him carefully, as if trying to understand him on a deeper level. "Your courage, it is rare," she said. "Among humans I have heard stories, but to see it in action, it inspires trust, loyalty, hope. You are remarkable." Daniel felt a quiet pride, but remained humble. "I'm just a soldier," he said. "I've seen what humans can do when we work together, when we make choices that protect others. That's what matters." As evening approached, Daniel prepared for the next phase of their journey. The station was a temporary haven, but staying too long would draw attention. Enemy scouts could track them, or mercenaries could arrive with their own agendas. Daniel and Lysara needed to leave before the nightfall, moving toward a larger human base that could provide more secure transport and resources. The journey out of the station was tense. They moved quietly through narrow corridors, avoiding personnel who might question their presence. Daniel kept Lysara close, adjusting her pace to match her recovery. Despite her injuries, she moved with purpose and dignity, her presence commanding respect from those they passed. Daniel admired her resolve. Even in vulnerability, she was a leader. As they exited the station, a sudden alarm blared. Red lights flashed across the docking bay. Daniel froze, scanning for the source. A group of mercenaries, not officially allied with any faction, had entered the station, seeking high-value targets. Daniel understood immediately they were after Lysara. He moved swiftly, positioning himself between the princess and the approaching threat. The mercenaries were skilled and heavily armed, but Daniel relied on his training, instincts, and quick thinking. Using the environment to his advantage, he led them through narrow passageways, creating obstacles and traps to slow pursuit. His knowledge of human tactics and improvisation gave them an edge, even against technologically superior opponents. Lysara followed closely, trusting Daniel completely. Her silver eyes flickered with a mix of fear and determination. She was vulnerable, yet her presence inspired him to fight harder, move faster, and think more strategically. Every step they took reinforced their bond, a partnership forged in survival, courage, and mutual respect. By nightfall, they had managed to escape the immediate threat, emerging into the rocky terrain surrounding the station. Daniel helped Lysara onto higher ground, giving them a vantage point to plan their next move. The stars above were bright, and the galaxy stretched endlessly, reminding them of both the danger and the possibilities ahead. They rested briefly, taking shelter behind a cluster of rocks. Lysara's injuries were stabilizing, thanks to the medical aid from the station, and she was able to walk short distances with Daniel's support. Their journey would continue, but they had survived another critical stage. Daniel's determination had carried them through the enemy's pursuit, and Lysara's trust in him had strengthened their partnership. As they prepared to move again, Daniel reflected on what they had accomplished. They had navigated hostile terrain, evaded enemy patrols, and survived ambushes. More importantly, they had built a connection based on trust, respect, and shared purpose. Daniel realized that human ingenuity, courage, and resilience could overcome even the most complex challenges in an alien world. Lysara looked at him, her expression serious but calm. "You have risked everything for me," she said. "I do not know if my people will ever understand, but I will never forget. You have my trust, my gratitude, and my respect." Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Recognition from a princess was significant, but what mattered more was the bond they had formed, one that could withstand danger, uncertainty, and the trials yet to come. As they set out toward the larger human base, the night stretched before them, filled with unseen dangers and the promise of survival. Daniel carried Lysara carefully, guiding her through the rocky terrain, aware that each step brought them closer to safety and further from the enemy. Their journey was far from over, but together they had proven that courage, trust, and determination could triumph over adversity, even in the most dangerous corners of the galaxy. The human base rose against the horizon like a beacon of safety, its lights piercing the darkness of the alien night. Sergeant Daniel Hayes carried Princess Lysara carefully across the rugged terrain, alert for any signs of the enemy. The night was quiet, save for the distant hum of alien patrols and the occasional rustle of rocks underfoot. Every step brought them closer to sanctuary, but Daniel knew better than to relax. Danger could strike at any moment. Lysara's strength had returned gradually. While she still relied on Daniel for support, her posture was more confident, and her silver eyes glimmered with determination. She had begun to understand the extent of the trust Daniel had placed in her survival, and she was ready to fight alongside him if necessary. The bond between them had grown stronger with each perilous step, unspoken yet profound. As they neared the base, the approach sensors detected movement. Daniel froze, holding Lysara close. Enemy scouts were near, moving swiftly through the rocky ridges. Their armor glowed faintly in the dim light, their weapons trained for precision attacks. Daniel assessed the situation quickly. There was no chance for a frontal assault. Stealth and speed were their only options. He whispered to Lysara, "Stay close, follow my lead." "We move silently and quickly. One misstep and we'll be exposed." She nodded, trusting him completely. Daniel had led countless missions before, but this one carried stakes higher than anything he had encountered. He was protecting a princess whose survival could determine the fate of an entire civilization. Every instinct, every decision mattered. The patrol moved past their hiding place, unaware of their presence. Daniel waited until the scouts were far enough, then led Lysara along a narrow path that snaked around the base perimeter. The terrain was treacherous, with loose stones and sharp edges threatening to betray their movement. Yet Daniel's careful navigation and knowledge of human survival tactics allowed them to advance undetected. Finally, they reached a vantage point overlooking the base entrance. Security drones hovered above, scanning the area, but there was a gap in their coverage, a small maintenance hatch that could serve as their entry point. Daniel studied the layout, calculating the timing of the drone's patterns. "We'll go through here," he whispered. "Careful, slow, steady. We can make it without being seen." Lysara followed closely, adjusting her steps to mirror Daniel's. The hatch was narrow, forcing them to move single file. Daniel went first, lifting Lysara carefully as they slipped inside. Once within the base, they were met with a labyrinth of corridors, dimly lit but secure. Daniel guided her toward a medbay, where she could receive proper treatment and where they could plan their next move. Inside the medbay, Lysara collapsed onto a clean cot, exhausted but relieved. Medical droids immediately assessed her injuries, administering treatments that would accelerate her recovery. Daniel remained beside her, keeping watch and ensuring that no one approached without clearance. His eyes scanned the room, alert for any unusual activity. The base was secure, but vigilance was a habit that could not be abandoned. Lysara's breathing steadied, and she turned her gaze to Daniel. "You've done more than any human could be expected to do," she said softly. "I owe you my life, my survival, perhaps even the fate of my people." Daniel shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone with courage and honor would do. That's what humans can do. We protect life, even when the odds are against us." Her silver eyes glimmered with admiration. "Your courage, it inspires. Even in the darkest moments, it brings hope." "I will remember this, Daniel Hayes, not just as a soldier, but as a man who chose to do what is right." Daniel felt a quiet pride, but he remained humble. Recognition from a princess was rare, but what mattered most was the survival of the mission, the safety of Lysara, and the future of her people. The next morning, Lysara was able to move more freely, though Daniel still supported her. Together, they met with the base commander, sharing intelligence and planning a strategy to counter the enemy. The commander was impressed by Daniel's resourcefulness, bravery, and leadership. "You've done humanity proud," he said. "Your actions have saved a life critical to intergalactic stability. You exemplify the best of what humans can offer." Daniel nodded, but his thoughts remained on Lysira and the mission ahead. Lysira stood beside him, regaining her authority with each passing moment. "We must act quickly," she said. "The enemy will not stop their pursuit. They know I survived. They will come for me again." Daniel listened intently, aware of the urgency. Together, they drafted a plan. Lysara would address allied factions to secure reinforcements, while Daniel would lead a small strike team to intercept and neutralize imminent threats. Their approach combined diplomacy and tactical precision, a testament to human ingenuity and leadership. Over the next few days, preparations were meticulous. Supplies were gathered, communications restored, and scouts sent to gather information on enemy movements. Daniel trained the strike team personally, emphasizing stealth, quick response, and the importance of protecting Lysira at all costs. His experience as a soldier was invaluable, and his ability to think creatively under pressure gave the team confidence. Lysira, meanwhile, strengthened her network of allies. Her presence alone inspired loyalty and courage among her people. She shared intelligence, coordinated defenses, and prepared her people for the coming conflict. Despite her injuries, she moved with purpose, her determination and leadership unwavering. Daniel watched her in admiration, realizing that her resilience matched, and sometimes exceeded, his own. Finally, the day of the planned counteraction arrived. Intelligence confirmed that enemy forces had gathered near a critical supply route, intending to strike at both human and allied bases. Daniel and Lysira approached the battlefield together, their coordination seamless. Daniel led the strike team, utilizing human tactics to set traps, create diversions, and outmaneuver the enemy. Lysira coordinated with allied forces, providing real-time intelligence and boosting morale. The engagement was intense. Enemy troops advanced, unaware of the ambushes and countermeasures in place. Daniel's team moved with precision, disabling advanced weapon systems and cutting off reinforcements. Lysira's presence on the communications network inspired allied units, guiding them to exploit weaknesses in the enemy formation. Together, human ingenuity and alien resilience turned the tide. At a critical moment, a heavily armed enemy unit attempted to flank Lysira's position. Daniel reacted instinctively, intercepting the unit and engaging in close combat. His training, courage, and quick thinking allowed him to neutralize the threat without harming civilians or allies. Lysira, impressed by his skill, provided strategic guidance, ensuring the battle remained under control. The coordination between human and alien forces was seamless, a perfect example of collaboration and trust. As the sun set over the battlefield, the enemy forces began to retreat. Their strategy had been dismantled, their morale shattered by the precision and courage of the human and allied forces. Daniel stood beside Lysira, watching the final retreating units vanish into the distance. Relief washed over them, but there was also a sense of accomplishment. They had survived, prevailed, and secured a critical victory. Lysira turned to Daniel, her expression a mix of gratitude, respect, and admiration. "You've saved my life," she said, "and in doing so, you've saved the future of my people. Humanity, your courage, it is remarkable." "I am grateful beyond words." Daniel shook his head, smiling faintly. "I did what anyone should do, but we did it together. Your people fought bravely, and we all made it through because we trusted each other and worked as a team." The princess extended her hand, not in formality, but in a gesture of mutual respect. Daniel grasped it firmly, understanding that this bond went beyond titles, ranks, or species. It was a bond forged in survival, courage, and shared purpose. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but together they had proven that humans, through determination and ingenuity, could stand as protectors and heroes. In the days that followed, Lysira returned to her people, stronger and more determined. Daniel remained by her side for a time, helping to stabilize alliances and ensure that the victory held. His reputation grew, both among humans and allied races, as a symbol of courage, ingenuity, and the best qualities of humanity. Stories of his actions spread across the sector, inspiring others to act with bravery and honor. Before parting ways, Lysira spoke to him privately. Daniel Hayes, she said, her silver eyes filled with warmth and respect. Your actions have not only saved me but have shown my people the strength of humans. You have my eternal gratitude. If the galaxy ever needs an example of courage, let them remember you. Daniel felt a quiet pride but remained humble. I don't seek recognition, he replied. I only do what is right. That's all any of us can do. As he watched her depart, Daniel reflected on the journey. The ambush, the treacherous terrain, the relentless pursuit, and the final battle had tested every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage he possessed. Yet through it all, he had survived, protected life, and made a difference that could echo across the galaxy. The experience had reaffirmed his belief in humanity, the courage, ingenuity, and heart that allowed humans to stand strong, even in the face of impossible odds. The stars above Carathos gleamed with quiet brilliance, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that awaited. Daniel knew the galaxy would continue to be dangerous, unpredictable, and filled with challenges. But he also knew that humans, through courage, determination, and the willingness to act rightly, could influence the course of events in ways that mattered. And somewhere across the stars, a princess would remember a human who had risked everything to save her, and in doing so had reminded the galaxy of the strength of humanity. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air against his face. The journey was over, but the story of courage, trust, and human determination would live on. He had carried a life across a battlefield, fought through danger, and proven that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, humans could shine brightly. The galaxy was vast, but Daniel Hayes knew that with courage and heart, no challenge was insurmountable. And with that thought, he turned toward the horizon, ready for whatever came next, carrying the quiet pride of one who had truly stood for humanity and for life itself.